matric class of 2022 achieving a pass rate of 80.1%. This is an increase from the 76.4% pass rate in the year 2021. Now, is this good enough though? And let's chat now to the Professor of Education at Wits University, Brahm Fleisch, to get analysis from him as to this pass rate, 80.1%, Professor. Is that good? That's an increase from 76% in the last year.
I mean, it's a very significant increase. So I think we really need to better understand what's going on in the sector. I think that you really pointed to the fact that the provinces that have really contributed most to the improvement are our rural provinces and the provinces that historically did the least well. So, for example, KwaZulu-Natal, Limpopo, Eastern Cape, those are the three provinces. Their improvement, and they have a significant portion of South African learners, have been the ones that have contributed the most to the improvement of the overall performance across the country. So that's a very significant thing. The other thing, when you look closely at the report, that reveals something about the nature of the improvement is that within those provinces, it's often some of the most rural districts that are really improving the most. So, for example, in the Eastern Cape, the province of Alfred Nzo West, which is very rural, very removed from the centers, the urban centers, they performed at an 83. And within KwaZulu-Natal, Ugu, which is a district close to the Eastern Cape border, had a remarkable score of 87%. So what we're seeing is rural provinces seem to be improving, and within those rural provinces, it's often the most rural districts that are really seeing the biggest gains.
Yeah. Prof, the people, or at least some educational experts, well, you might include in there the opposition parties like the Democratic Alliance, who will always criticize the basic education department about the quality of the result, because oftentimes they are blamed for chasing the pass rate and neglecting the quality of the actual pass. And this year's class, or should I say the matric class of 2022, achieving what the minister has said is the highest number of bachelor passes in the history of the National Senior Certificate. Does that go some distance to disprove what these complaints have been about?
I think there are real challenges in the school system, but I don't want to discount the fact that there's been real and significant improvement in our secondary schools, particularly in the grade 12. It may not be that every learner who passed is able to be a critical thinker and be able to do high levels of mathematics, but it is an indication that our education system is on an upward trajectory. And I think we should be focusing both on the very significant gains that have been made in the education system as an indicator. The matric is there. But I think we also can't neglect the fact that very significant number of learners don't learn to read and write and do mathematics at the end of grade 3. So I don't think it's an either or. I think we recognize that there has been improvement in the sector. There's been an improvement particularly in rural areas. But there's also huge scope for improvement overall. So we're in a moving system, but we need to concentrate on the weak points and ensuring that we continue the upward trajectory.
Yeah. Prof, whilst we're on the subject of the pass rate, the Democratic Alliance coming out yesterday saying the 80.1% pass rate is not in their books what is the real pass rate in the country. They are placing that at 54.6%. Do you know what they are talking about? Are they correct in their calculations, or is this simply an opposition party doing what they obviously ought to do, which is to criticize the government of the day?
So their calculation incorporates the number of learners that have essentially are not registered but started in the education system. But even in their own calculations, they recognize that there's been an improvement this year. So it may be 50, but it's 50, whatever the statistics they gave, it has their own statistics demonstrate that there's been an improvement. And certainly the matric pass rate itself is not a particularly good indicator. We need to see a whole range of other indicators, including the number of kids who passed, the number of kids that got distinctions, the number of young people who've got a university entrance pass. All of them looked at together show a little bit better picture of what's really going on in the system. And even then, when we concentrate exclusively on grade 12, we still don't know what's happening across the system as a whole, particularly in the early years where we provide very little information by school across the entire system.
Yeah. Prof, two areas of interest I'd like us to touch on before we close. And the first one has to do with the fall in the number of distinctions, at least in 4 provinces, and 2 of those are major economic contributors to the country's GDP, Gauteng and the Western Cape. What do you think is going on there?
It's very hard to know. It may be a function of the exam, the marking. Until we really look closely, it'll be very hard to pinpoint what that may indicate.
Yeah. Finally then, the mathematics result, there's been a drop from 57.6% in 2021 to 55% in 2022. This is a matter that's also concerned the head of department, that's the DG, Matanze Mamweli, who actually said, I think it was last night, that the country may soon have to export, or rather import, these expertise if children do not enroll in these field of study, particularly commerce. Is that something to worry about? How do we improve that?
Certainly. I think that the issue of mathematics, the percentage of kids who are doing well in mathematics rather than mathematics literacy is a really serious concern. And it's clear that the problem is not just in the secondary schools. We have lots of evidence from the pearls and from our own internal assessments and research that children are struggling to master the basics of mathematics as early as grade 3. So when we're thinking about the solution, while we can import secondary school teachers from outside the country, but we need to recognize that mathematics needs to be, foundation phase needs to be focused on in the mathematics in order to really see gains across the entire school system.
That's Professor Brahm Fleisch, and he is the Professor of Education at Wits University. Thank you very much, Professor, for your insights. Let's